All right. So have you ever felt like you're being played, like someone is pulling your strings and you're just dancing to their tune, you know? It's happened to all of us, right? I remember this one time I was at this flea market just browsing, and this guy had this whole booth set up with like antique watches. And he was so charismatic, like all smiles and charm. Anyway, I ended up buying this watch from him, like a supposed heirloom, for way more than I should have. Got home, took a closer look, and turns out it was a cheap knockoff. Totally played me.
So,
So, what's the deal with manipulation? How does some people just become these masters at getting what they want? Well, today we're diving deep into the playbook of manipulation thanks to this fascinating book, The Art of Manipulation. The author, get this, spent a whole year living with con artists to learn their secrets. Talk about dedication, right? One of the biggest things this book unpacks is how manipulation really hinges on understanding and exploiting human nature. It's not about being a jerk necessarily. It's more about using psychology to your advantage. It's kind of unsettling, but also kind of brilliant. For example, there's this tactic called intermittent reinforcement. It's based on the psychological principle that sporadic rewards are way more effective than consistent ones. Think of it like training a dog, right? If you give a treat every time it sits, it learns, but it's not like obsessed with the command. But if you give the treat randomly, sometimes yes, sometimes no, the dog becomes way more eager to please, always hoping for that reward. Turns out people are kind of the same. Think about those on again, off again relationships, the ones that are full of drama and uncertainty. That inconsistency can actually make someone crave the good times even more, overlooking the bad. It's why some people stay hooked even when they know it's not healthy for them. Thinking about this whole inconsistency thing reminded me of this friend I had in college. Super popular, always surrounded by people,
mm,
but they were also unpredictable. One minute they'd be your best friend, the next they'd be totally ignoring you. Looking back, I realized they were kind of a master of intermittent reinforcement, kept everyone on their toes, always wanting their attention. Another powerful technique is what the book calls strategic confidence. It's all about projecting this image of like, I don't need, you need me.
Mm.
Think about it. We're naturally drawn to people who seem self-assured, independent, right? Like, remember that time I went to that networking event and there's this person who just oozed confidence. They weren't even saying anything particularly interesting, but everyone wanted to talk to them. It was their energy,
Yeah.
their self-assurance that drew people in. And, it's interesting. The flip side of that is that sometimes projecting a bit of meekness can also be effective. It sounds counterintuitive, but people are often more willing to help someone who seems like they need it, someone who maybe knows less than they do, makes them feel knowledgeable, important. I remember this one time I was totally lost in this new city and I played up the whole, oh, I'm so lost and confused bit. Suddenly people were falling over themselves to give me directions, offer me help. Kind of funny how that works. Now, here's a technique that really surprised me. The power of avoiding arguments. We tend to think of manipulation as being very, confrontational, but often it's the opposite. Think about it. When you get into a heated debate, things get emotional. You get defensive. And the manipulator wins just by getting under your skin. They don't even have to win the argument. They just derail it. The book talks about this really fascinating approach called the unargue technique. It's this 6-step method for subtly leading someone to your way of thinking without ever engaging in like a direct argument. It's about observation, emotional intelligence, and a little bit of slyness. The first step is all about establishing common ground, creating that we're on the same team vibe. So you highlight shared interest. Maybe you both love classic rock, or you're both passionate about saving the rainforest, whatever it is. You're building rapport, a sense of connection, which makes them more receptive to what you have to say next. Then when those inevitable disagreements do come up, you acknowledge their feelings. You don't have to agree with their viewpoint, but you validate their emotions. You could say something like, I totally get why you feel that way, or that's a valid concern. This makes them feel heard and respected, which kind of disarms their defenses.
yeah.
It's like, you're trying to calm down a scared animal. You don't approach it aggressively, right? You speak softly, move slowly. Same idea here. Now, this next step is where things get really interesting and maybe a little bit ethically gray. You basically agree with them even on the points where you disagree. But the key is you're agreeing with their feelings, not their logic. You're saying, I understand why you'd feel that way, not, you're right. It's subtle, but it's powerful. For example, let's say you're trying to convince someone to invest in your new business idea and they're hesitant. They say, I don't know, it seems risky. Instead of launching into a whole defense of your business plan, you could say something like, I totally understand why you'd feel that way. Starting a new business is always a bit scary. See how that works. You've acknowledged their fear without actually conceding that your business is a bad investment. It's about redirecting their energy, not confronting it head on. And then you pivot. You subtly shift the conversation away from the point of disagreement and towards that common ground you established earlier. You might say, but you know what we both agree on? We both want to see this business succeed. This reminds them that you're on the same team, working towards the same goal. Now, at this point, they might be a little confused, like, wait, didn't we just disagree? Why are we suddenly best friends? But that confusion is actually a good thing. Because when someone's confused, they're more open to suggestion. It's like their brain is looking for an anchor or something to hold on to, and you're there to provide it. So you validated their feelings, agreed with their emotions, pivoted to common ground, and now you plant the seed. You gently introduce your perspective, but in a way that doesn't feel confrontational. It's about subtly reframing the situation, guiding them towards your way of thinking, without them even realizing it's happening. You could say something like, I was thinking about what you said about the risks, and it made me realize that the only way to eliminate risk is to never try anything new. But wouldn't that be even scarier? Missing out on the chance to achieve our dreams. See how you subtly shifted the focus? From the risks of the investment to the risks of inaction. It's all about framing. Now, this whole unargued technique, it's a bit of a mind game, right? And maybe it feels a little manipulative. But the book argues that even if your ultimate goal is ethical, this method can be used to achieve a positive outcome. It makes you wonder about the line between persuasion and manipulation, doesn't it? Okay, so we've been talking about these like high-level manipulation tactics, but this book, The Art of Manipulation, also digs into some really specific, almost sneaky techniques, It's kind of wild. Like, did you know that most people are actually terrible liars? It's true. They might be able to keep up a facade for a while, put on a good show. But if you know what to look for, you can often catch them out. The key is to pay attention to those tiny, uncontrollable reactions that happen right after someone's been surprised. It's like for a split second, their true feelings leak out before they can put their mask back on. The book gives this example of a woman who suspected her business partner was skimming money from their company. So she casually mentioned that she was thinking of bringing in an outside auditor, just to review their financials. And she watched his reaction super closely. And guess what? She saw this like almost imperceptible flinch, this flicker of panic in his eyes. That was all she needed. She knew something was up. Pretty clever, right? And you know what's fascinating? This technique works in all sorts of situations, not just when you suspect someone's lying about like financial fraud. It can be used to gauge someone's true feelings about anything. Like, let's say you're thinking of going into business with someone, right? And you want to know if they're truly committed to the idea or if they're just, along for the ride. You could casually mention something like, hey, I was talking to a lawyer about setting up the partnership agreement, and then just leave it hanging. Watch their reaction. Do they lean in, eager to hear more? Or do they kind of withdraw, maybe even change the subject? Those subtle cues can tell you a lot about their true level of enthusiasm. Now, I get it. This all sounds a bit manipulative, like you're tricking people into revealing their true feelings. And yeah, maybe there's an element of that. But here's the thing. Sometimes you need to get to the truth, even if it means being a little bit strategic, especially if you're dealing with someone who's not being totally upfront with you. Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about a different type of manipulation, the kind that plays on our desire to be helpful. Have you ever noticed how some people just have this knack for getting others to do things for them? It's like they have this aura of like, oh, I'm so helpless, I could really use a hand. It's like, uh, like we just like fall for it. This book calls it strategic meekness, and it's a surprisingly common tactic. Because let's face it, we all want to be seen as helpful and competent, right? We like to be the problem solver, the one who comes to the rescue. So when someone comes to us with that woe is me attitude, it triggers this almost instinctual response to step in and save the day. We feel good about ourselves for helping, and the manipulator gets what they want without even having to, lift a finger. And it's really sneaky? Often these strategically meek individuals are not even actually helpless. They totally know how to do the thing you're asking for help with. They just choose not to. Why? Because it's easier to get someone else to do it for them. Now, I'm not saying that everyone who asks for help is a manipulator, right? Sometimes people genuinely need assistance. But it's good to be aware of this tactic so you don't get taken advantage of. Like I remember this one time I was working on this group project, and there's this one person who was always like, oh, I'm so lost, I don't understand what to do. And I, being the helpful person that I am, I ended up doing their work for them. It took me a while to realize that they were totally capable. They just preferred to delegate. All right, so we've talked about a bunch of manipulation tactics, right? From playing on people's emotions to strategically asking questions, and even that whole social media manipulation thing. It's a lot. But here's the thing that really blew my mind when I was reading The Art of Manipulation. Sometimes the most powerful manipulation happens under the radar.
Mm.
It's so subtle you don't even realize it's happening. Like, think about body language, right?
The way someone stands, the way they make eye contact, it all sends a message. And manipulators, they're experts at reading and using body language to their advantage. There's this example in the book about this negotiation, right? Two CEOs are hammering out a deal, and one of them, he's a total master of body language. He starts subtly mirroring the other CEO's movements. Like if the CEO leans back in his chair, he leans back too. If the CEO takes a sip of water, takes a sip of water. It's not like he's doing a straight up imitation.
Yeah.
It's all very subtle, almost subconscious. But the crazy thing is it totally works. Because when we mirror someone's behavior, it creates this sense of rapport, like a feeling of connection. And when we feel connected to someone, we're more likely to agree with them, to see things their way. Makes you think, right? Like how much of our communication is nonverbal and how much of that is being manipulated. And speaking of subtle tactics, let's talk about silence. Now, most people, they're uncomfortable with silence, especially in a conversation, right? It feels awkward, like you need to fill the face with words. But manipulators, they're not afraid of silence. In fact, they use it as a tool. They create these pregnant pauses, these moments of tension to make the other person feel uneasy. Think about those classic movie interrogation scenes, right? The detective leans forward, stares intently, and then silence. Suspects start squirming, they start talking, they start revealing things they wouldn't have otherwise. It's classic manipulation. And, you don't have to be a detective to use this technique. Let's say you're trying to negotiate a raise You've made your case, presented your accomplishments, and now you hit them with the number and then silence. You don't say anything. You just wait calmly and confidently for them to respond. Chances are they'll feel that pressure, that tension, and they might just say yes. Or even if they don't immediately agree, the silence gives them space to think, to really consider your proposal. It's a subtle way of shifting the power dynamic. So there you have it, a crash course in the art of manipulation, from the blatant to the barely perceptible. It's a fascinating and maybe a little bit unnerving world, right? But here's the thing I want you to take away from this deep dive. Awareness is power. Now that you know about these tactics, you're less likely to fall for them. You can see through the smoke and mirrors. And maybe, just maybe, you can even use this knowledge to your advantage to become a more persuasive communicator, a more effective negotiator, a more confident individual. Just remember, with great power comes great responsibility, right? Use your newfound knowledge wisely, and always remember to treat others with respect, even if they're trying to manipulate you. That's all for this deep dive into the art of manipulation. Thanks for joining me, and until next time, stay savvy out there.